Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending this meeting of the Governance Committee on Tuesday, the 8th of August, 2023. Before we start this evening, I would just like to outline some housekeeping rules. I think we've heard all these before. There are no planned fire alarms, so if it does sound, run. No, please leave via the emergency exits. Can I request that all mobile phones are kept on silent and switched off? Thank you. Don't mind. Right, we'll start with some introductions. I'm not going to do them in the order it says on this sheet. I'll just go around from left and work our way around. We can do some introductions, please.
Councillor Damien Bretherton, Walton Liddell West.
Councillor Peter Gabbett for Lostock Hall.
Councillor Lou Jackson, member for Enshbridge.
Dawn Highton, Head of Audit and Risk.
Matt Derrick, External Audit from Grant Thornton.
Councillor Ange Turner, representing Broad Oak Ward, Penwitham.
Councillor Elaine Stringfellow, Lostock Hall Ward.
Councillor Margaret Smith, New Longton and Hutton East.
Claire Gornall, Democratic Services Officer.
Chris Moyster, Director of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
And I am Councillor Colin Sharples, Chair of the Governance Committee. Members of the committee are attending in person here at the Civic Centre. Other members of council may also dial in to the meeting via Teams. I don't think anybody has yet. To observe and or participate in the meeting, please note this meeting is live streamed on YouTube. The web link for this can be found on the council's website. Members on Teams are asked to keep their microphone on mute and only unmute when they wish to speak. Could I remind members to unmute themselves once they have finished speaking to enable the meeting to proceed smoothly? And before I move on, is the sound system working? Can everybody hear clearly enough? Good. Apologies, please.
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Roberts and Councillor Pillinger, and we have two substitutes, Councillor Jackson and Councillor Stringfellow.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? No. Okay, we'll move on then. Item number 3, minutes of the last meeting. I have the minutes of the last meeting in front of me for approval. Are there any points of accuracy on the minutes, or can we propose the minutes for approval?
Seconded, Chair.
We're all happy to approve the minutes? Yes. Those that were here. Thank you. Moving on. Item 4. External Audit Progress Report and Auditor's Annual Report. Welcome, Matt. Can I just say that you're very fortunate in as much as you're at the start of the meeting, whereas Georgia, unfortunately, her item last meeting was right at the end. So you get to go first. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the first item, is our audit progress report, which just gives a bit of a summary in terms of where we're at in the audit cycle. On page 10 in the pack. On page 10, page 12, just gives an overview of the deliverables for the audit of the 22-23 financial statements. You recall we brought that audit plan to the Governance Committee in May. We are due to receive the draft accounts next week, I believe, and we'll commence the final accounts audit as soon as we've got those accounts, and we intend the plan is to report on the outcome of our audit in the November Governance Committee, where we'll deliver our audit findings report and draft auditors report, which is the audit opinion on the financial statements. We've also on the previous page, just give a bit of an update of the other work that we do. We have now substantially completed the housing benefit subsidy claim certification work, and the draft report's been issued to management for clearance, and we hope to formally bring that to a close in the next week or so. The other item on the agenda is our auditor's annual report, which is our report on the value for money conclusion for the 21-22 financial year. So I'll move on to that item. So, sorry, just another appendix. So I won't go through this report page by page because it is quite large, but obviously I'm happy to take questions on it. But in the executive summary on page, sorry, it's very small, page 3 in the pack, in the report, gives an overview of our findings and conclusions in relation to the broad areas that we cover in the value for money work, which is the financial sustainability, the governance arrangements, and arrangements that the council has for improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Where we've identified significant weaknesses in the council's arrangements and reported what we call key recommendations, that is not reporting that the council hasn't delivered value for money, but where we have identified weaknesses in the council's arrangements for securing value for money in the use of taxpayer resources. And so within this report, which I'll take you through, there are a range of key recommendations and improvement recommendations that we've identified. Improvement recommendations are more where we consider that there's area for improvement to be in line with best practice, as opposed to any kind of substantial weakness in arrangements. Happy to report that all the recommendations we've reported have been considered and accepted by management with suitable responses, and we were happy with the responses that have been provided as well. Some of the recommendations have already been the work to the remedial work is already underway at the time of writing this report, and we've noted that where applicable in the report as well. So I'll just jump over to page 7 in the report. So this first section covers the council's arrangements for securing financial sustainability. And within this area, the scope of work, we would consider the council's arrangements for robust financial planning and monitoring, managing financial risks and identifying and delivering savings, alignment of the financial plans and operational plans to the strategic objectives of the council, and the council's arrangements for securing sustainability and managing the kind of longer term, medium term risks to financial sustainability. Within the area of the financial planning and monitoring, we have reported an improvement recommendation in relation to sensitivity analysis that's undertaken as part of the budget process. There is sensitivity analysis undertaken when developing the budget and considering the kind of different scenarios and assumptions that are applied there. But that analysis is not formally presented to members, and therefore we've reported an improvement recommendation because we believe that would aid transparency and also the understanding of risk associated with the budget. Furthermore, in terms of the alignment of plans between financial plans and strategic objectives of the council, again, we have identified an improvement recommendation in relation to the capital programme. The medium-term financial strategy does include some explanation of how the capital programme links to the corporate strategy, but we believe that could be strengthened by more clearly demonstrating how the capital plans link to the council plan outcomes. But in conclusion, in terms of financial sustainability, we've not identified any significant weaknesses, and the improvement recommendations that I've just discussed are reported there on page 12 and 13. Governance. So in the scope of work we look at the council's arrangements for managing risk, the effectiveness of processes and systems to ensure effective internal controls, including budgetary controls, how the council ensures it makes properly informed decisions, and also the monitoring of ensuring appropriate standards are adhered to. In the governance area, we have identified a significant weakness, and that's on the detail of that is on page 15 in the report. Now, this relates to an issue originally identified in an internal audit review of the Commercial Services Directorate, and relates to an issue with a contractor where a contractor was onboarded, and it was identified that there were not sufficient controls in place to restrict access that individual was able to access within the council's network and folders. And also that there were found to be some breaches of the IT security framework in relation to the contractor had transferred some documents to his own business email account. And although these issues were identified within the contractor primarily worked, for work in relation to Chorley Council, these issues, because of the shared service arrangements, these issues and the identified weaknesses in arrangements exposed South Ribble to the same risks because there were no restrictions in place to restrict access to information in South Ribble Council either, and the same situation, if you like, could have occurred originated in South Ribble, and therefore we consider that the weaknesses identified apply to South Ribble as well. It was further work that was done by management in a kind of follow up to this issue did identify a further contractor with similar kind of circumstances, but in that instance, South Ribble was not exposed to as much risk because the second contractor did only work on Chorley projects. So in relation to this significant weakness, we have reported some key recommendations, which are on page 17 and 18 in the report. And these primarily focus on that we recommend that the council should review the safeguards that are in place in relation to the onboarding of contractors. All those contractors not onboarded by South Ribble, the council should still be alert to potential risks and ensure that sufficient controls are in place. Commercial services officers working across both councils, again, we're also able to operate for a period of time outside of the control framework, and the second recommendation relates to that issue. And we do recommend that the council reviews arrangements to ensure there are appropriate checks and balances in place as part of the shared services arrangement there as well. We have also reported an improvement recommendation in relation to this because the original issue was identified due to some invoices that had been essentially matched to suppliers. And the report did also highlight that there seems to be a mismatch between creditors and suppliers on the system versus the contracts register. And so our recommendation is that there should be an improvement in the checks between creditors and suppliers to ensure there is a contract in place and that's properly documented on the contracts register in all cases. So our conclusion is that the council is exposed to this risk as a result of the lack of controls around the onboarding of contractors, and with the commercial services, because the commercial services director provides services under a shared service arrangement, the risk kind of equally applies to the council as well. Further on in this section, we have also noted that internal audit did a review of utilities management in the period and identified a number of weaknesses. And we do note that there's a remedial plan in place and underway. But nevertheless, the issues identified do expose the council to some operational risks, such as health and safety, for instance. And therefore, because of the significance of that, we do endorse internal audit's recommendations and emphasise the need to address the issues on a timely basis as well. Just moving on to page 21, which is the section on in the report that covers the council's arrangements for improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Within this section, we review the council's arrangements for monitoring performance, reviewing performance and identifying areas for improvement, how the council works with partners and through its key partnerships, and also the procurement arrangements in place as well. In terms of procurement, we have identified a significant weakness in arrangements. Originally originating with the issue in relation to the contractor. This is identified that some of the procurement the procurement strategy is out of date, and the council are in fact aware this should be updated and are kind of in progress with that. But these issues have also highlighted that the procurement function at the time of kind of writing and the time of the issues these occurred, we consider to be under-resourced, with only 2 substantive employees within that team, and only 1 with appropriate kind of qualifications. We also reported that some indication of a lack of proactivity within the team, evidenced by some of the issues identified in this case with the contractor. The related contract was not included on the contract register as expected, and there are waivers required to be signed off from procurement officers. And the waivers signed off between 2019 and 2022 in relation to this contract did receive sign off. However, given there were in fact some gaps in the documentation, this should have been identified and resolved. We do note the council have already put arrangements in place to address the risk by securing additional support from Blackburn with Darwen Council. And we've the key recommendation in relation to this issue is key recommendation is on page 24. And then finally, we have also reported improvement recommendation in relation to ensuring that there's adequate impact assessments when implementing organisational changes. Again, kind of originating with the issue identified within commercial services, the shared services arrangements have kind of shone a light on some issues there with the impacts on the service delivery in terms of that directorate as a result of the shared service arrangements put in place. That's all I was going to cover on the report, Chair. But just to add that with issuing this report, this brings our 21-22 audit to a close, and following the finalisation of this report, we'll issue our audit certificate and formally close the 21-22 audit as well.
Thank you very much, Matt. Excellent report. And I can open this out to committee now. Anybody got any questions on this item? None? Yes.
Just bear with me, I'm a bit muddled up with these pages because they're all numbered differently, not in particular good order. Well, I just find where I'm up. If I could first take you to the first item 4, which was page 10. And at the bottom of page 10, we're talking about the draft financial statement are likely to be available for audit in August. The deadline for the preparation of draft audit accounts is 22-23 is the end of May 2023. However, the ongoing impact of the pandemic, the complexity of the accounting requirements, and the capacity in the finance team means that we have agreed with the officers to commence the audit on a later timescale. Do I take it from that statement that the lack of capacity is within your organisation and not ours? Or am I reading that wrong?
No, the lack of capacity is not within our organisation. It's to do with the ability of the council to prepare financial statements within that time frame, so the end of the financial year, 31st of March to the publication date of at the end of May, is quite challenging nonetheless. But then when it added in kind of the ongoing, the legacy kind of impacts of the pandemic, the date we finalised the previous year audits and start of this calendar year, and obviously the impacts of that. But certainly we've agreed with the finance team that ahead of time that the accounts wouldn't be available for the end of May, and we were prepared to commence the audit in August as agreed.
But then turn that round, Chairman, to Louise. Could you then tell us what the situation is? Are we short of people? Where is the capacity lacking?
So the dates for completion of the accounts have moved over the last few years. So where we've had them where the date for completion was September with an audit date of November, and then it was brought forward from September to the 31st of July. And then a consultation was undertaken by government to ask whether the authorities, and because it's not just local authorities, it's fire, police and other organisations, thought that it would be appropriate and feasible to bring it forward from the 31st of July to the 31st of May. I think there was an overwhelming response to say that it was not achievable by the 31st of May, definitely from the local authority organisations, but nonetheless, the decision was taken nonetheless to impose a deadline of the 31st of May. So there was a backlash because of that. We did kind of best endeavours to try and produce both sets of accounts for both Chorley Council and South Ribble Council by that deadline. But it's just not possible. And I suppose to give you some kind of assurances around what the state of play was across all the Lancashire authorities, so that includes the counties, the unitaries, fire, police and all of the districts. At the 31st of May, out of the 15 organisations, only 2 had managed to submit their accounts on time. Another one came a week later, but we were at the end of June and nobody else had submitted them. It's just because of the level that not only have the deadline been compressed, but the level of complexity that is involved in putting the accounts together has significantly increased as well. So in answer to your question, I think the 31st of May would be a deadline that is possibly achievable if I brought significant numbers of staff in for a period of time to be able to do those accounts, but they are not required for the majority of the time. So we would be bringing in unknown staff to try and train them up to turn it round in a period, in a very short space of time. And even then, you know, I just wonder whether with too many staff, can you coordinate it? Because it is a very, very coordinated process to end up with what is 150 pages of documents, many of the numbers of which are interlinked. So we are awaiting to see what the outcome of that will be. Obviously, we've not hit the deadline, but nor have the majority of councils. Going back to the previous year, that when the deadline for completion of the accounts was the 30th of September, sorry, the 31st of July, with a deadline for audit to be completed by the 30th of November, only 12% of bodies had managed to get a completed audit by the 30th of November production of accounts. And many authorities are still struggling, not with just producing the 21-22 accounts, but they have accounts and audits that are going back to 2016, 17, 17, 18 that haven't been signed off, which has become a significant issue for the government. But, you know, and until you get each one signed off, you can't move on to the next one. And that is the case across quite a few Lancashire authorities. It's not for us, we're bang up to date, but it is an issue. So that's quite a lot of information. I hope that gives you some context within which we're working.
Yes, thank you for the explanation. As you say, what goes on in other councils is not what we're interested in. What we're interested in is what goes on in this council. And it doesn't actually, it says it has been decided that it will be put back, but I don't think we have a date on that, do we? What are we aiming to achieve? How far behind will we be as against the 31st of May?
So as far as the South Ribble accounts, at lunchtime today, I got the final draft, and tomorrow I will review those with a view that they will get published. If not tomorrow evening, then it will be on Thursday morning. But we are absolutely there with the draft accounts.
That's good. Thank you for that. We're obviously making progress. My concern is that, like it says, the ongoing pandemic, which keeps being referred back to, we're now 3 years from that. This report, which is value for money, which we've now got, which is July this year, we're talking about 21-22. And the further these things go back, the more difficult it is for us to keep remembering what actually went on at that time and the reports that came to us. So obviously to achieve a quicker outcome is obviously more favourable. And I'm sure you're doing that to the best. I just was concerned that maybe you needed some more capacity for a shorter period of time.
No, and that point is, is well received. I think as far as the accounts themselves were concerned, and the audit that took place on the financial aspects of it, that was boxed off much earlier in the year. I think we did that in January, and that was November, and we issued the South Ribble accounts and the audit on time, but the value for money is a different audit. Yeah, that's separate. Yeah, but I genuinely, my honest view on this is, I could bring in 5-6 people to do nothing but the accounts, but as I say, the level of complexity now that is involved in them, you can have more staff, but it's still that coordination that's required, and to do it in such a short space of time with so many transactions, I think would be difficult, and that's absolutely the feedback we put in the consultation exercise. But unfortunately, it was not recognised, and I think probably that as a whole, government will need to come back and revisit it, because they will have found that so few bodies have been able to deliver that. No. I don't know whether you have experience from your other clients.
Yes, we do. I mean, I think in terms of, just to clarify, in terms of the impacts of the pandemic, what we mean by that is just the cycle of, we're not signing audits off in kind of proximity to the year end as we were before the pandemic, where we were aiming to get them done by the end of the summer. We're not back at that stage yet, where, as Louise explains, where there are several bodies where accounts are more than 1 year, 2 years behind. That's not the case, obviously, for this council. The other major factor that can impact on the timeliness of getting the accounts finalised and our audit is they are dependent on external information as well, in terms of the valuation of land and buildings. That's an external expert that the council commissions, and we have to audit that. The local government accounts are also dependent on the assurances we require from the pension fund as well. So there are times when we're in a position where we could sign off the accounts, but then the last thing we're waiting for is the pension fund audit, which is another whole other complexity that can have an impact on whether we can actually sign off the council's accounts, because the pension numbers are so significant. We're not able to do that without those assurances. So there are factors that affect the country, essentially, that can have impact on everyone's accounts.
You will go first.
Anybody else? Yes, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Overall, I thought the report is very thorough. I think it's quite a positive report in terms of its identified issues. The management obviously have put comments down on how to tackle them. I do feel personally, I think on some of the issues there are, they maybe come across as a bit harsh. I mean, particularly the procurement one and the lack of, I think, procurement staff. It was only the other day, I think, I read about 6 authorities, like Knowsley Council, Tameside, St Helens, Rochdale, Stockport and Trafford, just got the link up, are having to all do a shared services for the procurement department because there's a lack of skills out there to actually tackle that issue. So I think it's one of them where, yes, it highlights an issue in our authority, but then it's important to benchmark against what other authorities are doing, especially local area and nationally. And I think that proves a positive point, that it's not just us and something we're not doing correctly, it's affecting others. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the external auditor and obviously our officers for going through the hard work, because whilst their budget is very small, I think the actual transactional amounts we do are very, very large amounts, of which sort of are akin to a large business and doing probably about 100 million. I think Louise Masson will probably be able to correct me on that, but it was only when we were doing the walk around and officers were telling me that the actual value we get coming through the account systems is very, very vast. So I think overall positive. It's found some issues, but also that we'll tackle them. And it'd be interesting to see in the next year or two that we'll probably be looking at no significant weaknesses in some departments that they are currently highlighted now.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else before Jamie? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very thorough report. I was quite shocked, probably along with other colleagues, when we learnt about the contractor situation, one of the previous governance committee meetings. It was quite shocking that a contractor was able to, whilst competing for bids, I assume, able to send.
Damien, sorry, let me just interrupt you there. I don't want to backtrack. We've gone through all that at a previous governance meeting in Technicolor. I mean, we have. I just tonight I just want to focus on the recommendation that we've got from Grant Thornton and also consider the management comments that have been made. I don't want to cover all ground. If we need to ask Matt questions about for clarity about this, or maybe we want to consider some of the recommendations maybe we're not happy with or whatever, that's fine. But I do not want to discuss what we've already discussed. Let's just keep it simple. Yeah. Look at the report and leave it there, please.
What I was coming to, with the management comments, I'm assuming we've put systems in place now to catch situations where we haven't got the honesty and integrity of contractors, etc. So there must be systems in place where we can catch a situation before it happens again. And I just want some reassurance that are those systems in place now? Have they been tested? And are they working satisfactorily? Thank you.
The answer is to all three questions in part, the first two in part. So we have introduced new systems and controls in relation to the role of contractors. And I'll take a steer from the chair as to how much detail, but if you remember from the situation, it was a quite particular situation in that they started off as a quasi-employee and then kind of morphed into something else. So there have been IT processes put in place to limit access to systems in the same beyond what an employee would be. We've introduced additional training both for contractors using our systems and for procuring officers to make sure they're fully aware of the obligations on them and the processes they need to follow. And we're in the process of embedding those. Have they been tested? Well, in that they are being used, they are being tested in that way. We've not experienced any failures or aware of any failures of these tests, but equally that particular situation isn't arising in the same way perhaps it did before, because we're more aware of this split role that there was before. So yeah, I mean, I've been picking up some of the recommendations. I think built on actions that had been identified with the internal audit reports. So they were things that we were already on with because we were aware of these issues and we were taking steps to remedy them sooner. They have built on them. There were additional requirements put in, and you'll see from the management responses that we've adopted those and are looking to implement them as well and enhance the environment.
So can I come back so we're confident that a situation like this won't happen again because of the systems we've put in place?
I am confident, but as you know, Damien, I promise nothing. But yeah, I'm confident. We have the controls are suitable, but there is no accounting for individuals. We can put all the controls in place. We can deliver all the training, but if someone goes off piste, and doesn't do what they should do as part of that process and control, then it could lead to the situation arising again. But you've got to have that situation where someone is going to deliberately do that, or carelessly or recklessly do that, and the training we've got in place, I think, will limit that risk significantly.
Yeah, and it was just to say, just in relation to the controls in place and the links between finance and procurement, we're just undertaking an exercise at present where we've gone back over the past 3 years and looked at all creditor payments to all suppliers, and looked at any supplier with whom over the period of 3 years we've spent more than £50,000. All of that information gets passed out to the directors and heads of service, and they are to come back to me by the end of September to say what is in place for that supplier. So is there a contract in place? Is there a waiver in place? If there's not, why not? What are the arrangements around it? So in some cases, that's a cumulative spend over 3 years. So it might be 4 different things, and we'll unpick that. But that would identify whether there is this has happened in the past in a similar way. But from the information we've got at the moment, we don't believe there is.
Which leads me to the next point about the procurement, which you've commented on. And as I understand it, there was a manual system, but now we've got software in place, I'm assuming, to tie up procurement contracts, invoices, and before we pay, we make sure that the work's been done. Do we have checks to make sure the work's completed, for example?
Yeah. So on the finance part, for everything that goes onto the system, we need a purchase order that's input by the budget holder or someone nominated. The goods are received, somebody goes in, the budget holder or the nominated person will do that. The invoice is checked against it, and that goes through. So there are quite stringent controls around that. There isn't an interface between the finance system and the procurement system. And I think what on page 19 of the report, it says we will look to procure a new finance system, and as part of that, we would consider whether there is an integrated procurement system that we would be able to do something, but we haven't got the functionality to do that within the current system.
So we're on with getting that in place. And do we have a system where when we get an invoice, we actually check that the work's been done and completed? Is there a system where we check? Because somebody could just send an invoice saying, I've done it. And I've come across this before in industry. They say, I've done it, there's the invoice, but the job might not have been completed. So I just wonder if is there checks in place to make sure what's on the invoice is actually what's been done before we pay for it. So
before at the very start of the process, the budget holder would decide the goods and services that was required and raise a purchase order, get a purchase order number, and that would be given to the supplier. The supplier should quote that on their invoice. So when the invoice comes in, it can be married up against the purchase order. But the finance system will not pay the invoice unless the budget holder, the nominated representative, goes in and physically says that the goods have been received. It's prevented from doing so. So there is that control in place. And there's also a segregation of duties. I couldn't go in and raise an order, goods receipt it and match it against the invoice, because who knows, I'm not ordering anything for myself. So there is always a segregation of duties and another person involved in the process, but it can't flow through the system unless goods have been receipted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Margaret, did you want to come back to something?
Thank you, Chairman. I think, as been said, it's just a very comprehensive report, this. And I think the fact that you have actually gone through some of the reports that came from internal audit, where we had serious concerns about the level of control that was actually in place, particularly in senior management. And this does actually address that. You actually put it in black and white exactly our concerns that we had at that time, how very concerned we were about what was going on. The chairman doesn't want to go back through it. I think we should. I think it's important that we learn lessons from this. There has been some serious breaches here one particularly in IT, a serious breach. It actually says in the report there is a breach of IT, and yet the whole thing seems to have been swept under the carpet, which to me is absolutely appalling.
Margaret,
I'm
sorry, no, I'm
sorry.
going to stop you.
No, can I just say, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, I don't.
I've also read the report further on that says that we should, if we have concerns, we should talk about it. And
I'm
I
not
think
sure that now is the time to talk about.
when is the time?
We've got a report to go through, and we've gone through all that before, Margaret. It's been to committee, and this is not a soapbox moment. We need to move on.
The leader who was bullying people by saying, if you're not careful, you'll be in court, all these sort of things. We've now got a report that is now for 21-22 coming in July 23. And we did have very serious concerns about those reports. And we were very worried. As you all know, you were on this committee as much as I was at that time, and we were very worried. I want to know, when is the time to talk about it, if it's not when the report comes back to us to tell us what went wrong?
What we're talking about here right now is this report. And what we've got on this report are some recommendations from our external auditors. We've also got some management comments. And that's what we need to talk about. Are we happy with the management, that the management is doing something to mitigate that recommendation? And that's as far as I want to go tonight on this item. If we need to discuss it further, fine, write to me, and I'll have a word with the Chief Executive Officer, with Chris, and with the leader, and we'll maybe arrange to discuss it. But we need to move on. We've been through it all before, and I take your point. Yes, there are issues, but I want to get through this item. This is a report that Matt and his company have given us, and that's what I want to deal with right now. I don't want to go through all the other stuff. It's not the time, in my opinion. Now, I'll defer to the monitoring officer if you wish, but
if I
that's
could
my
just
view.
say, it only makes issue with 2 of those reports. There was a lot more reports that came out of those. I think in total there was 5 that were inadequate. I'm still concerned that we don't have the follow-up to those. We have recommendations here that are hopefully have all been implemented, but I still have the concerns that some of the things that went on, particularly in the utilities area, and particularly with the rents and those sort of things, that we have had no feedback to make sure that those are actually now being properly monitored and properly looked after. It's the same with looking after the assets. We were told, I think it was 18 months ago, we were going to get an assets manager who's going to look after everything because things had gone wrong. And yet we have never been told whether we've actually had somebody put in place to do that. These are the sort of concerns I have, Mr. Chairman, that I think we genuinely need, as a committee, to have some answers to.
Okay, let's have a look. Are you saying then that this recommendation that we've got from our external auditors isn't adequate enough? Is that what you're saying? We're looking at this item. Are you saying there's something?
What I'm saying is, once this report has been accepted, we then, I think, at some point need to have some further feedback from either internal audit to make sure that the controls are now in place and are working satisfactorily, because there was a lot of concern about a lot of reports.
Yeah, can I ask Dawn to come in?
What I was going to say was, if it would be helpful, you are right, there were a number of limited reports last year, but what I can do is bring an update report to set out exactly all the actions that were included in those reports and the progress that's been made. Would that be helpful?
I think that would be very helpful, Mr. Chairman. I think it would help us all to have that reassurance that things have moved on and we're not going to get any more of those reports again, I hope.
I think we all hope.
I'm sorry. Well, I think we all hope. I can have that reassurance.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Are there any other statements, comments, questions on this item? None? Okay. It's only for noting, isn't it?
It is just for notes. Repeat into these statements.
Yeah. Okay. Number 5. Thank you again, Matt, for your report. Treasury Management Out-Term Report from page 15 onwards on your agenda, and I think it's you, Louise.
It is. Thank you, Chair. So the report provides an update or an overview of the Treasury management activities for the year ended 31st of March 2023. A considerable amount of information that is in the report has already been covered off in the Capital Outturn Monitoring Report that went to Cabinet in June. But in summary, the report just gives an overview of performance against the Treasury Management Code of Practice and our prudential indicators, the Treasury Management management strategy that is agreed at the Finance Council in February each year. So going through some of the kind of main points of the report, it covers the capital expenditure between paragraphs 11 and 13, which was 13.555 million over the course of the year. It then proceeds to cover the financing of that. So the actual financing required for that specific expenditure over the year was just over £3 million, although no borrowing was taken at all during the year, and South Ribble again moves into another financial year without any borrowing whatsoever. And it also covers the Treasury position in relation to investment and performance over the course of the year. So, I mean, significantly, bank interest rates rose from 0.75% at the start of the financial year back in April, and at the end of March, they had increased to 4.25%. They're now 5.25%. As a consequence of having such large cash balances, we've been able to invest that, and we've over the course of the year we were able to just generate just less than £600,000 in interest receivable. The balances at the year end and investment are just over 35.5 million, and those will be utilised over the coming year. And other than that, there are no significant issues to note. We've operated in line with all of the prudential indicators set. We have operational borrowing limits and authorised borrowing limits, but of course we didn't need to invoke any of those because we didn't take out any borrowing. So I would say it's an uneventful report, other than to confirm that we've got healthy cash balances, and as a result of those, we've been able to generate significant amounts of interest receivable over the course of the year, and we're continuing to do that in the new financial year as well. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Louise. That was all very positive. Damien.
Yep, thank you for the report. I found it interesting reading it. It all seems to make sense, but when I was keenly looking at the investments that we've made, at the top it says list of investments as at 31st of March 22. I'm assuming that's a typing error. If it isn't, can we have an updated list? Okay.
Apologise for that. No, those are the investment as at the 31st of March 23. Yep, sorry, that's not been picked up in the
okay, thank you.
Read. Yep.
Yeah, Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair. As Councillor, as Louise said, it's a positive report on gone under budget on the capital expenditure. Quite massively there. I know she refers to it as borrowing, but I think there's been some confusion in the past that debt as well is zero. It was zero last year, it's still zero at 31st of March 23. The only question I really have on anything is the investment we made to Chorley Borough Council. Just what are the sort of the controls around the conflict of interest we have? Obviously having a shared service, that was all.
So obviously, when any lending is done to other organisations, we seek to ensure that what we're getting is a good rate of return. So we contacted our Treasury advisors and other brokers to see what the current rates were at that specific date that we wanted to take out. We were prepared to lend to Chorley Borough Council. So we've got an audit trail, which and we probably do more because of the nature and just to absolutely prove the integrity of the transaction, and the lead members at both councils were contacted to advise of that and advise of the rates. So it is the competitive rate that we would have been able to get if we'd have lent to any other council, and better than the debt management office rates with whom we often place deposits.
Thank you very much. That's brilliant.
Thank you, Louise. Sorry about that, Ange. I always leave the best to last, though.
I know you, so I knew I wasn't being marginalised. Thanks, Louise, to you and your team for this report. General question, and I'll use table 1 as an example at paragraph 12. I'll just use that as an example. Should I be concerned about how far out the estimates are? And because I don't know what parameters are used to draw up the budgets, what criteria, it seems to be, I think, well, I get the impression, obviously, from coming from my industrial background, that I'm looking at that and thinking, can we get the estimates better? And does by having those estimates out significantly, 50% in most cases, does that have an impact on the ring-fenced expenditure could be being utilised for something else? Because obviously demand, facilities and cash is all about timing, isn't it? So are we setting aside a sum of money based on an estimate that I would say is significantly out compared to the industry that I've been involved in, aerospace industry? And or is that local government norm, and also to ensure that those estimates aren't affecting cash requirements somewhere else? Thank you.
Okay, so I think with regards to with the capital side of things, the capital expenditure, when a scheme is developed and a budget is approved, we then try and scope when we think the profile of that expenditure will be incurred. We report as a hard year-end date of the 31st of March. A lot of expenditure could potentially have been incurred on the 1st of April, the 2nd of April, but the figures would still be as they are. And there were some schemes that were on the way to completion, but just tipped over the year end. So in some ways, it's a little artificial because, as I say, it's a drop dead date, but some things just tip over. We have had slippage on some of the schemes, and that has meant that the budgets are protected for them, because unlike revenue, where you spend it by the 31st of March or it's lost and we start a new budgetary year, for capital expenditure it's different. The scheme is the scheme, and that will be carried forward in the capital programme. For each of the schemes, there's detail in that outturn report that went to Cabinet in June, and it says what the slippage was and the reasons for that. But things like, for example, the expenditure on Town Deal, that took longer to get moving than had been anticipated when the profiling of the budget came into play. So it's something that we do look through and refine during the years, what we call slippage. But here is to kind of prove, well, we set off with a budget of 29 million. The reality is we spent 13 at the end, and there were some slippages, and that's documented in the report. But the budgets are protected. That will continue. What it has enabled us to do is, clearly we've not incurred that expenditure. Therefore, we've been able to invest that cash, and that's what's led to the in part to the £600,000 we've attracted in interest receivable. Had we spent all of the 29 million rather than the 13, we would have had lower cash balances. We still wouldn't have borrowed, but we would have had lower cash balances and our interest receivable wouldn't have been as big.
Good to see that financial control.
Yeah.
But also, obviously, yeah, you're right. It's a representation of programme slipping, which is probably not good either. But the positive output of that is we get more interest on the money we've not spent. But obviously, the downside is things haven't progressed for whatever reason. But thanks for that explanation. I don't know if it's worth putting a caveat on these in future. Or we probably, as you said, we wait for the June report, which will... Okay, thanks for that full and frank answer. Appreciate it, Louise. Cheers.
Thanks, Louise. Yes.
Thank you. Of the 6 counterparts on the list on page 25, 4 of them have already been repaid, I assume, because they're past the due date, and 2 of them are due at the beginning of September, which is quite a considerable sum. And you've just been talking about the 27 million. Have we spent it or have we reinvested it? Or is it half and half or part? And how easy are you finding to actually get people to take our money, basically, and pay us interest?
So in terms of the 2 deposits that will mature on the 7th of September, when those come off deposit in the run up to the coming off deposit, we have a very detailed cash flow forecast. So we're constantly updating that on a daily, weekly basis for what we anticipate to be our outgoings, be that revenue items such as it would be the salaries, also the capital programme, it might be, revenues, benefits, all of the council tax, all of that money is all wrapped up in our cash flow balances. And so the income we expect in, grant receipts, etc., we forecast that through, and then we look at what we anticipate to be our daily cash balances, and therefore how much surplus cash we envisage having, and therefore we look to deposit that. When we place the deposits, we contact the debt management office, we contact brokers, we see what the current rates are available. I think now what we're seeing is it was difficult to get people to take our money during COVID, really, because they were also awash with cash because all of the COVID grant money came in, and so therefore they didn't have the need for it. But as all that COVID money has been spent now, they are needing money, and therefore they are happy to take our money and at higher rates. So we check out, because we can get money for different periods of time at different rates. So it's working out how long we think we've got it before we need it and what's the best rate that we can get for it, but always making sure that we err on the side of caution, because liquidity is important, but it needs to be a secure deposit with whom we invest that money.
I was just interested whether we are actually managing to get people to take our money and getting some return on it, and a decent return at that, because obviously interest rates have gone up. But you're managing to find people out there who would like to have a little bit of our money for now.
Yeah, and the brokers act as that intermediary. People are contacting them to say, we need £5 million for 6 months. Who have you got out there? And equally, they try and hook up with the people who were saying, we might have some surplus cash. What rates can you get? What periods of time? And we just take a view on that. But we do put money with the debt management office, and that can be, I know tomorrow I'll be going in to sign a transaction off, and we might just put it on deposit for a week, and then we'll look to take out a longer term deposit. They've been okay, but we do shop around for the best rate.
Thank you.
Yeah. Point. I'm assuming the Troy-Liberia Council term is next January, not 23s. We've not had the money back yet, so I'm assuming that maturity there's 24. Is it next January?
It absolutely is next
Yeah.
next January, yes. And that was taken out in March 23. I think March 23 until January 24.
Ah.
I think we've just got a bit trigger happy with
Oh.
those. I apologise for that, but I'll pick that up.
Yeah, I was just looking at the rate that you got. I just wondered if 4.7 in March 22 was very, very high.
Yeah.
And now I just wondered if that's because Chorley Borough Council was higher risk and you wanted a higher return. But now that you've corrected that, March 23,
March
It
23
makes
it was
sense.
4.7,
Yeah.
and I think as I said earlier, in March the interest rate was about 4.25. So again, we're getting better than the Bank of England rate, which was which is positive. Yeah. So apologies for that.
Damien, you're well and truly in front on spotting the deliberate mistakes this evening. You are going to win. I'm confident you're going to. Okay. Are there any other questions on this item? And can I apologise to Councillor Phil Smith? I forgot to ask if there were any questions on the last item for people not on committee. Are there any from you on this item?
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't got a question, but I've got a comment. I feel as though I'm a bit of an also-ran. I attend most of these meetings, as you know, and always have done for many, many years. And to be quite honest, we know this system of speakers and things is going to be replaced, but you can't hear a thing back there. There's a noise up there. Can't hear most of what's going on. I'm trying to pay as much attention as I can, and I don't want to disturb the flow of the meeting by pointing out yet again that the system is not working and I can't hear what people are saying. Often in these meetings, as you know, I've left the meeting and gone on to YouTube because I can hear it quite clearly on YouTube, but you can't hear a thing in this room. Just a comment, Chair. Thank you.
Would you prefer to sit where you are now? Would that?
It will be a lot clearer. Yes,
Yeah,
it would.
feel free to
But,
remain there.
I'll bring my papers over here, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, is that it on that item? Is that one for noting as well, isn't it? Thank you very much for that. Right. SIP for guidance, practical guidance for local authorities and police, from page 33. And I would invite Dawn to talk to us about this one.
Chair. The purpose of this report is to present members of the committee with the latest audit committee guidance and position statement from SIPFA. The guidance is attached, hence the really long report. And at this stage, it's just for you to read and digest, as it represents best practice of what a good audit committee looks like in terms of the purpose, the model, the core functions and the membership. So at this stage, like I say, it's just really for information. You will see included in the guidance that there is a suggested terms of reference and also a self-assessment. And the intention is that over the next few weeks, we will be comparing what our own arrangements are against best practice so that we can bring back the results to the committee in September and see if we need to make any amendments to how we operate. We did this a couple of years ago against the old guidance, so we're not expecting huge changes, to be honest. We've had a quick look through and the amendments we've identified so far are only minor. In addition, we are asking for your help in that the guidance contains a skills and knowledge questionnaire. And apologies, we have included hard copies, but we also needed to include the skills and knowledge, so they'll be circulated at the end. We're asking that members complete the skills and knowledge questionnaire so that we can assess what training needs the committee has and that we can develop a comprehensive training plan. Just finally, there's also been some other, it's called an audit committee update. SIPFA issue these periodically and we've attached that for information. And they issue it when there's more current things that they want to refer to rather than just the guidance. So we'll issue those as they are published. But yeah, if I could just reiterate again to please fill in the skills and knowledge and then let me have that back before the end of August. That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. I love that term, read and digest. The reading's the easy bit. The digest is not quite as easy. But is there anybody wishing to comment on that or ask any questions?
Thanks.
Please go first.
I've just got a quick question. It refers to audit committee. That is us as All right, that's the generic for other areas of the country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the report, which is again very interesting. I'm looking at the supplementary, the one that came out late on page 7, and it notes that the audit committee is apolitical and advisory, which is, I find that's a good point to make. There has been times in the past when it appears to be political, and there was a situation, one of the governors committee meetings before the election, when I just made an innocent question about evaluation of a particular property, and the previous chairman wouldn't let me come back when another member, what I thought told some sort of slightly misleading information. I was coming back to correct it on an apolitical basis, and the previous chairman shut me down and wouldn't let me carry on. So I think it's very important that we've got this report, and it does say there in black and white, the committee is apolitical, and I think that's the best approach to take. With a governance committee, we're here not for political reasons, but to try and make comment and suggestions, etc. So I think that's very good. In terms of training, when I first got elected over 4 years ago, I had invitations to go to SIPFA training courses, which I found extremely beneficial. Unless I missed an email, I don't appear to have received any invites, and I'm just wondering how we get invited to any training events, which could be very useful, especially to new members. There was an incident when I did go to the training in Leeds. It was interesting to meet other councillors from around the country. And what opened my eyes at the time, the various councillors were discussing how much money they were borrowing to invest in offices for yield and that type of thing. And I thought, wow, this is dangerous. Councillors borrowing huge amounts of money to invest. And some of the councillors from other parts of the country were actually boasting they were getting a 2% yield. And I just couldn't believe listening. Thankfully, this particular council hasn't done that. The South Rugby Council has been good in the past. They've not gone out to borrow money externally to invest for yield, and I believe the situation, the law's changed now where they're not allowed to do that. I just feel sorry for any councils in the country that have done that, and they know they must be sitting on huge losses at the moment. I'm very glad and pleased that South Rugby Council has not taken that route. But that was one of the advantages of going on the training, because you get to hear what's going on with other councils, and maybe when we can bring back and like now, for example, I could make a comment that, look, we don't want to do what other councils are doing. I know comments have been made that it's good to compare ourselves with other councils, but in that situation, the other councils are making bad mistakes, and we shouldn't really do what other councils are doing in some circumstances. So, are we going to get invites for more training on the SIPFA? Thank you.
There's a couple of areas there in the to answer questions. Talking about the apolitical aspect, as chair, I'm determined that it'll be apolitical, and I'm happy to accept challenge if people feel I'm not being. He was looking to the left. Yeah, but there will be times when it doesn't go quite right. There will be mistakes. There will be comments that are taken out of context. So that's worth bearing in mind. On the other side of it, yes.
So, okay, there's two parts to it. One of the things that Dawn, is asked for completion is the questionnaire, so we can do that skills gap analysis, and that'll feed into training requirements. Members are also offered the PDP proceed process, where that'll highlight training opportunities and training needs through that process. But we will keep our eyes open for, and I'll get on to democratic services, because a lot of the course information for members comes through democratic services, and make sure it's circulated to appropriate committees. Yeah. But I'm surprised that hasn't been happening, to be honest. So I apologise if it hasn't been. Unless I've missed the email, I'm not clear. I don't know, but it certainly dropped off a bit. We keep mentioning COVID, but it did drop off in that period. So there were a couple of years where there wasn't very much being offered, but I'm sure they're back up and running. So we'll have to make sure if we haven't been sending them out, we start doing again.
Good, thank you. Any other comments or questions from members of the committee? Any comments or questions from people not on committee?
No, thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, we can move on then, can't we? So, item 7, Chair of Governance Committee, response to external audit planning inquiries. And Dawn, you're going to talk about this one as well.
Again, thank you, Chair. So again, this report sets out the questions and responses from the Chair of the committee to assist external auditors with their planning inquiries. I've attached the questions and the responses, and it's for the committee to confirm that they're happy really with the responses and it's an accurate reflection. And then external audit will take that. But thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Are there any questions or comments on this one? Margaret?
It just seemed pretty straightforward to me when I read it, and the responses seem to match what should be there. So I'm quite happy to go along with it.
Thank you, Margaret. Anybody else? Bill? Nothing. Okay. This one's for a decision, I think, isn't it? So we can do a show of hands, can't we? All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. The final item, the strategic risk register from page 131.
Rebecca's online, so.
Okay, good. So I'm going to invite Rebecca Aziz-Brooke, who is online, to talk to us about this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an updated strategic risk register, which includes the 16 strategic risks of the council, also including actions that are in progress, as well as new actions that are planned to further mitigate identified risks. So the purpose of the report is really just to provide information and assurance to members that the risk register is a living document and is reviewed regularly and updated. So I'll just run you through kind of the key changes to highlight to members of the committee what's changed since last time. So 2 risks have been updated, with R5 and R6 seeing a reduction in inherent risk, and 2 risks, R1 and R3, have seen an increased risk score. So the 2 risks that have reduced are R5, which is response to external legislation. So this is reduced to reflect the reduced risk from large-scale external changes such as GDPR, Brexit, as we've now seen most of the significant impacts of these areas of legislation and policy. And we've implemented council policies and procedures in response to them. The other risk score that has increased is R6, which is around staff capacity and skills. Sorry, it has reduced, not increased, reduced. This was reduced due to the recent successes in adopting a kind of more strategic approach to recruitment around growing our own, developing a graduate and apprenticeship programme, and also appointing a dedicated officer to recruitment and talent as well. We'll also be looking at reward and recognition to support retaining skilled staff as well. The 2 risk scores that have increased are around R3, which is the poor financial sustainability. So this increase reflects the risk of poor financial sustainability due to high inflation, and also the ongoing uncertainty around government funding as well. So in terms of mitigating actions in place, we've got the medium-term financial strategy, the transformation programme and budget setting, which will help manage the council's budgets and also deliver opportunities for savings and income generation. And then the second risk score that has increased is R1, which is around incidents impacting service delivery. So this increase reflects the increasing risk of industrial action on pay. So in terms of mitigating actions that we've got in place around this, we've got continuity plans to help mitigate the impact of any industrial action, including prioritisation of services and redeployment of staff, and also regular meetings taking place between the union and the council to ensure that continued communication. In terms of other key changes to note for members, a new risk has been identified. So following last year's feedback, we've included a risk around climate change. So this is to reflect both the reputational risk and negative impact on our communities as a result of the climate emergency. And then also to note, one risk has been removed. So this was around failure to adjust practices and processes to reflect the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this has been removed just to reflect that the recovery actions have been subsumed as part of wider pieces of work and now delivered as part of just business as usual. I think there are all the key changes within this report. And yeah, I welcome any questions from the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rebecca. Excellent report. Have we got any questions for Rebecca? I think I'll start with Damien.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting report. I just want to, if we can have some expansion on the risk in terms of industrial action. The risk has gone up from 8 to 12, which is quite a 50% increase, which is quite significant. I'm just wondering that you've increased, the risk has been increased, but are there any thoughts on how likely that risk is to occur? And where it says positive meetings have been taking place with the council, etc., who's actually involved in the meetings to try and alleviate that problem? So how likely and who's involved with the meetings? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the meetings, that is between the council and the union. So that's just to kind of ensure continued communication between the two, so we're aware of kind of what's going on and what's coming up. In terms of the likelihood, I suppose that's a little bit more difficult to say, but we've kind of just included it in there due to obviously the public sector strike action that has gone on in other sectors across the public sector. So it's really just to kind of reflect that potential risk.
Peter, do you have something?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was my comment was it looks pretty straightforward. Again, for any risk assessment and things like that, the nature is the scores and ratings are subjective anyway. And the things that we've got some that have increased and some that have decreased, and I think the comments in there explain them very well. I don't really see much of an issue with noting or approving the report, Chair.
Thank you, Peter.
It's regarding our two strategic partnerships. The direction is still going level, no improvement one way or the other. And my concern is about City Deal. I just wondered if we are at a point where we're actually getting anywhere. We did have, I think it was a Saturday workshop some 12 months ago. And we were given the assurance that at some point we would make some progress. I'm just wondering if there is any progress. Maybe it's not for this committee, maybe it's for council, I don't know. But it seemed an opportunity to just ask the question.
That might be one for you, Rebecca.
It is one. Yes, Chair, it is one for me. I don't think the update is for this committee because there's matter. The attention today is on the risk register, and I accept it feeds in to the risk, but the progress report on it I don't think would necessarily impact on the changes to the level of risk that we're currently because it's for all strategic partnerships, not just the City Deal. We are progressing with agreeing a common position on factual position, and there will be an update to committee to council probably around the beginning of September.
Thank you for that. I didn't think it was sort of quite the right place, but I thought I'd just pop it in, and I'm glad to hear at least we're going to have a report in September. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions or comments on this item? Phil? Nothing from Phil. Okay. This is only for noting as well, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to clear, yes, it is, Chair. This is a document that's owned by SMT, but with the senior management team, but obviously Audit Committee, Governance Committee have oversight of the responsibility for making sure we're managing risk properly. So that's why it's brought to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Matt and Rebecca. And with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much.